All right, everybody out there in the internet world, thanks again for joining me. I'm Chris Malloy, and you're attending my Google Hangout. I'll try to keep this short and sweet today and a little bit informal. So this is a continuation of a Hangout that we did about a week ago, where we're taking a spreadsheet, one that we use internally to track knowledge labs and the agenda, mainly who's speaking at which lab and at what time, what location. This is a continuation of that. So my main goal previously was to show you how you can get out of spreadsheets and develop a custom app, not really being a developer, meaning not needing to know a lot of programming to do that. So we took this spreadsheet that you see on my screen right now, and we turned it into lab agendas. So now our records are being tracked within the platform. We have the mobile interface. We are REST web service capable now to integrate into these tables with. The tables are more relational. We even set up some notifications so that as things change, I can send emails out to the people who are speaking at these labs. So today I wanted to add a little bit more to that. We'll get into some JavaScript. We're going to talk a little bit about how we can leverage other pieces of the platform. And to be frank with you, any one of these topics I'm talking about today you could spend several hours on. You could take an individual lab at multiple levels when we give our knowledge conference on scripting, on reporting. But today we're going to hit scripting a little bit. We're going to talk about how we can actually create an enrollment system within our catalog. It's going to be very lightweight. It's not going to, there's probably a million better ways to do it, but just for sake of time, I just want to show you the art of possible. Then of course, as you take your own business use case and turn it into something production ready and useful, you can definitely spend more time and polish it a lot better than what you see today. But at least you get a taste of what's going on within the CreateNow community, and hopefully will help you get some ideas on what you can actually create in the platform. So we're going to start off by talking about scripting. I'm going to show you a few changes I made to the to the app that we created last time. So I'll bring you up to speed there. We're going to talk about scripting. Then we're going to talk about our catalog. Mainly, I'm going to use a record producer today. And then I'm going to go into reporting and maybe creating a dashboard at the end if we have some time, so that you can manage enrollment and see how things are, see which classes are popular and whatnot. So picking up from where we left off last time, we created this app called the Agenda Tracker. I did add one more table to this application. And please, if you guys have questions during this, post them on the community where this Hangout feed will be located. I'll try to monitor that, especially immediately after, so that we can have a conversation. If you have any questions, that's the place to do it. Okay, so bringing you back. So I created one more table called the enrollment table. It's a pretty simple table. It doesn't have very many columns, but this is how we're going to track our user enrollment. And it has a numeric field that we maybe at some future time can manage a wait list. So when a class fills up, we can start prioritizing those who registered after, and they get first priority to the seats when they become available to a particular lab. We created really just a couple reference fields for the person who's enrolling and which lab they're enrolling into. So that was one change I made before we got on this Hangout. A couple other changes I made. Let's go into one of these lab agendas. I added some data so that we have something to work with. So we didn't do this during our presentation last time. So we've got some courses in there now. We could have imported this data in through a spreadsheet, since that's what we had previously, or we can come up with another means of getting this data in here. We can manually enter it if we wanted to, or if we have some sort of approval process before we allow which courses to be offered at Knowledge. We could have that as maybe a catalog request with an approval. So multiple ways to bring in data. I put some in just for the sake of this lab. And included some instance templates, because we do provide instances that people work on when they take our labs at Knowledge, and of course some lab agenda. So let's go to the next level. So let's talk about scripting a little bit. As we are developing our own custom apps, we've kind of taken this idea of something that we are doing. We're going to improve upon that process, create an app that's useful to us. Knowing JavaScript is very handy. So there's, for the sake of argument and so we can, for simplicity's sake, let's think of scripting in really two worlds. So there's the client-side scripting, which really has to do with user experience and not very much with security. So your client experience, we can use some client-side scripting to improve upon that experience. And the other type of scripting is server-side scripting, where things happen on the server. So anyone that really knows how to manipulate a DOM can get the source to any page and mess with the scripting. So even though I am showing you some client scripting here, it can easily be hacked. So we're gonna provide some user client scripting so that our form reacts better, and then we're gonna do some server-side scripting too to make sure that we are enforcing the policies that we're expecting. So without further ado, let's go ahead and grab one of these labs here. I'm going to add a client script that we're only going to focus on start date time right now. What it's going to do is it's going to make sure that we have a speaker, that the speaker is assigned to a course, and that we have a start date and end date. And it's going to check to see if that speaker is already speaking during that time period. And if it is, we're going to see the start date give us an error. We're going to do this all with client script, and then I'm going to show you on the back end how we enforce that with some business rules, which is also a scripting mechanism within our table. So I find the easiest way to really start with scripting is to go to the table I would like to have that scripting interact on. And you'll see under the configure section in ServiceNow, one of our context menus, one of our context drop boxes, you'll see several options. One of them is the client scripts option. You'll also see that there's database options for manipulating the dictionary. And this is all specific to this particular table. Same thing with notifications. So let's go ahead and go into our client script. Now, because we have limited time, I went and wrote this already. Please don't judge the code. It was just, I threw it together quickly yesterday just so we could have something to talk about today. But you'll see that it's interacting on this table. And you will also see that I have enabled it for both mobile and desktop type devices. So this script will work on mobile. And there are several types that we can deal with. Now this is one I'm using as an on change. You can also do when the form loads, you can do some sort of, you can run some script, or if you do a submit, you can run some script. I like the on change because as we start to change the date in our start time, it's going to check and tell us immediately before I even submit if that's a valid start time. So by selecting on change, you get a minimal framework to work in. This function will be called for, or will be written for you. And then your implementation happens after the line here you see. So when you're doing this on your own, you'll see the framework, and then you fill in the blanks. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually use an asynchronous glide Ajax call, and this is one of the recommended ways of doing this. So instead of just blocking my form, I've created a callback. So there's a function here that once we're going to go back to the server, and we're going to have them check to see if I already have another course in the database that, if my start time falls within that any other course range. And here's our callback method. When it calls back, it's just going to put an error on the form. And this is kind of a standard setup of what you would do. We would pass in our parameters. We pass in the library we want to call, and also the function that we want to call within that library. So if we were to go look at this code right now, on the server side, you'll see that it's actually doing a glide query. So it's using our database, it's querying for some data. And we may go over there and show you that as well. So let's go back to our lab agenda, and let's pick one. Notice I assigned me as a primary speaker. This is a very long course. It starts September 1st, and it goes all the way to September 27th. And I did that mainly for testing purposes. That way, if I pick anything in between that date for my start time, you're going to see the error. It just makes it easy to test. So I'm going to go ahead and take this course here. I'm going to assign myself to it. Let's go ahead and get myself an end time. And now remember, I'm only doing this on my on-change events only happening with the start date. So if you're wondering why I'm filling the form out backwards, for a complete app, we would want to do it on multiple fields. So anyway, so we would want to check on the end date as well, is what I'm saying. And also if the speaker changed, we would want to check again. So let's go ahead and pick a date in between some date I'm already scheduled to speak. And this is what you get. So our client script is really taking the app we started developing in the first webinar, and now we're adding some complexity to it. So with client script, now my user experience changes a little bit. And this is the outcome of that client script. Speaker is already scheduled during this time. The date and time will not be saved. Okay, so if I wanted to protect this on the database side too, what I would do is I would implement that same similar type logic within a business rule. So before we go over there, I already have a business rule written and it's already active. If I decide to still update this, you would still get an error and no submission would happen. So you would stay on the form. Now this is protected at the database level. So this error you're getting back is happening on the server side. Can't really manipulate the DOM, and even if you wanted to bypass the client side scripting, this was now protected with some server side scripting. And that's why you see a different error on the submission. So let's go over to the business rules and start talking about some server-side scripting. So these are all, like I told you, I'm just trying to give you the art of possible during your CreateNow experience so that you can start building apps from some simple, useful use case. And the more you know about ServiceNow and the more you start growing in in knowledge, the more you can add to it in a useful way. So once again, right-clicking on the context of this form, I'm going to go to business rules this time instead of client scripts. So let's go ahead and plop over there. And I do have one business rule, speaker date time conflict. Let's go ahead and go into that. And all this stuff's in the wiki too. So I know I'm really breezing past a lot of this, and we have whole courses on this stuff. So just bear with me if it seems to go by quickly. But we only have limited time on this webinar. So this is a business rule. Now this is an example of a server-side script, and you can execute it before, after. You can do it asynchronously, so that it's there's different use cases for using these different types of actions. I'm going to do before an insert or update. I want this to go ahead and run. Once again, we've tried to remove a lot of the complexity from from just writing this all in code. So you may or may not be able to do your business rule without writing any code. You could filter, if you want the conditions to be based on a specific filter, then you can go ahead and filter it there. You can also take certain actions without writing any scripts, right? You can go ahead and abort the insert altogether. The commit's never made at the database, or you can go ahead and write the script. And since we're talking about scripting, let's do it. So here, once again, we have some function that is going out and using a glide record. I'm using an encoded query, and I'm querying our database to see if there are any other courses that the speaker one is already currently speaking at, and I'm getting those. And we're going to iterate through those courses, and we're going to see if the start time that I'm trying to insert into the database conflicts with any of those other courses. So we are using some iteration here. It's still very, very fast. And you'll see that we're not doing any insert or update. The only thing we're doing is we're bailing out of this action if we do find a conflict. So we're not going to save, and we're going to make sure that the user knows that there is a problem. And that was the text that you saw on the screen when I tried to actually do the submission. So as I said, we have two places we can do this. A couple things I would like to just bring up when it comes to scripting. Most of our scripts can be just done inside of the client script code or the client script form itself, or the box itself, the script box. If you find yourself redoing the same thing over and over, it's probably a good candidate for refactoring. In this case, I don't really like all the code that I have here in my business rule. So this would be a very good candidate to refactor and put into something like a script include. And that's what we call our library files that are script includes. You could see if you type script include in the filter text search, you can get a list of all the script includes that are there. Let me just pick one and then get rid of the filter. So a lot of our out-of-box code is refactored into what we call script includes, but you can create your own as well, and then just invoke common code from one central place. So you can create a util file that does, if you, like I said, if you find yourself making the same query over and over for a particular time conflict, you can just refactor that into a particular script include. Now, these script includes, I told you I would tell you about this when we're in the client script. So when we're making a call back to the server from our Glide Ajax call, what it's calling is actually a script include, but it's marked as client callable. So it's accessible from the client. You'll see that we're extending the abstract Ajax processor to be able to, to do those Glide Ajax calls. So remember, if this is an Ajax call that you're trying to make from a client script, you're going to want to make sure it's client callable. Now, because we've added our application scopes as well, you can really tighten who has access to this code from which application from this control as well. Cool. So that kind of hits what I wanted to talk about with scripting. We can go into this in much more detail. There's all kinds of things that we use to manipulate the system with our script includes, our client scripting, and business rules. I like to think of business rules as like database triggers. So you get a chance to trigger some action before insert, after insert, delete, query. Excuse me. So the next thing I would say for this app is maybe we have some requirement to create a catalog request for enrollment. And once again, you do not have to put this in the catalog as part of your request mechanism. So if you want users to enroll, I don't know the best way to implement this for knowledge. We might just do it off the registration page, or we'll have to get some other feedback on what the best way to do that is from our user experience, how it's currently implemented. But some people implement UI pages, and then they create a UI page that looks very similar to their own portal look and feel. They keep it very simple. If they mark it as a public UI page, and it's accessible for people that are not logged into the system, and they can interact with your page. If you do want a login required, so perhaps a registration process is necessary to log in to register for a knowledge lab, you need to be registered for our knowledge event. Then that would be a case where it would be a non-public UI page, and maybe we have some integration with another system that is tracking if they are already registered in some database somewhere else for this event, if we're not using the same database. So because we're in the platform, we get all of that. But just for, like I said, for the art of possible, we're going to go ahead and create a new record producer. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit. So we're, once again, building on the idea of what we had in our spreadsheet, and we're moving more and more into a full-fledged app. So we're going to call this, let's just call it Knowledge Lab Enrollment. And we want to make sure that we are using our agenda enrollment table as the table we're going to have users enroll into. Excuse me. And we want to make sure we're going to place this in our catalog, so we do need to select which catalog. I have only two that I've built, or that come standard with ServiceNow. But I don't want to build that during this call, so we'll just use what we have there right now. And let's put this under Office just so we know where it's at. Now, once again, I can make this desktop and mobile so that I can do this on my phone if I wanted, and I'm going to say yes to that. We're going to call this knowledge of enrollment. And we're not using a template to generate the data. I think we're good to go for this. So let's go ahead and just save so we stay on the form. I know the inclination is to hit submit, but it takes you back to your previous page if you do that, and I wanted to remain on this form. Okay, so we now have a record producer for this particular, go into this particular table. And what a record producer does is it allows users to input information, and then it inserts it into that table. So one of the rules, and all this is in the wiki, so if I start talking about rules and stuff and you wonder how I know that, you could search the wiki for record producer and get some of the rules. But one of the rules is if I name my variable the same name as the column within my table, then whatever gets inserted there will automatically get placed in that column without having to do the scripting and mapping. Of course, we have a mapping mechanism as well that you could do that if I wanted to map that field to a different place. Or if I wanted to use some script first to manipulate the data before it gets mapped there, I could do that as well. So I want this to be visible everywhere. I want to know which user is going to be enrolled. And like I said, this has to map exactly to the same name as my table. So I'm a little OCD, so for sanity's sake, I'm going to go ahead and check to make sure that's the column name of that table. So let's go back to my enrollment table here. Oops, don't want that. It'll be on my enrollment table, and let's just start a new one. And the column name, by right-clicking on any field in the table, I can actually see how it's defined in the database. So it's enrolled_user, and I think that's what I put here. It is excellent. And I want the default value to be, I'm going to use a little JavaScript here. So there are some fields within our dictionary that allow admin users and creators to use JavaScript inline. So I'm going to take the currently logged in user, and that's what I'm going to place here automatically. Then I'm going to make this a read-only field. It's mostly just informational. And there's some syntax that I can use to do that, and some API calls that ServiceNow publishes on their developer API documentation. So by calling glide system get user ID, it's getting the logged in user. Once again, that's on the wiki, and that's going to set my default value to that. So we have our first field. Oh, hit submit, so it bounced me back to the previous page. So let me go back into my record producer here. We have one variable now. One thing I forgot to do is if I want it to be placed as a higher priority on the form, I want to make sure that it has a lower number. So we're going to have two variables here. And this one is going to be for the lab. So we're going to select a lab for this one. Oh, and I did make one mistake. Let me go ahead and go back. It's usually the problem when I do these live events. I end up making some mistakes. I don't want this to be a text field. This is a reference field to my sys user table. So let me go make a few changes here. Apologies for that. So I want this to reference another table in my database, my sys user table. And I can add some qualifiers here so that when a user tries to select, in this case, we don't need to do that, but I could, if I wanted, I can say I want only users to show up that are true. And then let's just make sure my default field is still there. I don't need to mark this mandatory because, like I said before, I'm going to make it read only anyways. Okay, so one more field here. Once again, we are going to use a reference field for this. This one is going to be mandatory, available everywhere, and choose. Okay. And I want this to reference my lab agenda table. This is going to show which course is there and which speaker. I will not use a reference qualifier for this one either. We're not going to set any default fields. We're going to let the user select what they want here. And I do want this to appear on the form after my sys user. Okay, so that's pretty much it. So let's go ahead and try it. So now as people come through the catalog, let's go ahead and create just one UI policy to make this. So same thing as we talked about before, every form you can do this. We're going to create a UI policy. Read user and we're going to set it on that one field. So our variable is our enrolled user. We're going to make it read only, and that is it. So let's go ahead and go back to our record. Actually, let's just go to our catalog now and see what it looks like if somebody were to come into our catalog, what they would see. So we place it under Office. I think I put it under Services. Oh, nope, I saw it. It was under Office. There's my Knowledge Lab selection. My enrolled user is pulling from the currently logged in user, and we could select which course we want to pick here. So maybe I want to join Integrations 201 course. And then we can go ahead and submit that, and it would enroll us into that course. So that's how we would expose it in the catalog through a record producer. Like I said, with more time, we can really get involved here. We create UI pages that have a calendar and maybe an agenda builder so they can select and remove courses before the submission occurs, and they can kind of see, how available they are for particular courses. Just showing you the art of possible. So let me give you a couple other things here. Maybe as a user for this, maybe as the admin of these courses, the one kind of developing, I would like to know what's popular and what's not. Maybe we don't offer Integrations 101 anymore. People don't care about it, but they really do care about application development. So we start offering more of those courses. So let's use the platform again and what we get for free to go ahead and create a new report. Okay, sorry, I meant to click View Run here. And we'll have a wizard where we can actually create a report. So we're going to create a report here. And I want this report to be on the enrollment table. Right now it's selecting. Oh, yeah, it is on the enrollment table. Let's give it a name, and we'll say, K for knowledge enrollment popularity contest report. So we know which classes are the most popular. I would like to have this as a line graph. I want to group it by actually, let's just trend it by when we actually were enrolled, when we actually created. We're going to do it on a daily basis. And we're going to group it by the lab. So let's just go ahead and run this and see what happens here, what this report looks like. Cool. So we have 3 courses that have been enrolled. I can see which ones are popular on a daily basis. So looks like on Tuesday, this one was popular. Wednesday still grew in popularity, but then dropped like a rock on Thursday. So this is kind of a neat report. We'll go ahead and save it. We're going to make it a gauge. And the reason I want to do that is, okay, and the reason I want to do that is because if I were the one responsible for the spreadsheet before, and now I'm not, I would maybe want to make a new dashboard. So once again, leveraging what the system has within the CreateNow framework, I'm going to create a new page that has to do with Knowledge Lab enrollment. And I am going to add the report that I just created as a gauge to this particular dashboard. What did I call it? I shouldn't have named it knowledge or. Let's see what we have here. There it is. K popularity contest. Okay, and I want to add that. Let's say just at the top of my form for right now, and that's good enough for me. So now I have this nice dashboard that so as an administrator, I'm doing things that you may have been able to do this in a spreadsheet with writing the right formulas and such. But once again, we're just leveraging what we get for free by building on the platform itself. Anyways, that is pretty much it. We can really have fun with this type of application development. There is so much more to talk about. We can go into a multi-hour lab just talking about reporting itself, or dashboarding, or creating catalog items or UI pages. But hopefully what I've shown gives you the sense of ease of use. We can solve real problems pretty quickly. We get a lot for free, and we get to have a lot of fun. I mean, this is the funnest thing I get to do, is just build within the ServiceNow platform. It's just quite an amazing platform that I love. So that's it. You guys get on the community, talk, communicate, send me emails if you want. I would like to get to know you, and hope you guys have a good rest of your day. Thank you.